Here we are, mate. Back on the podcast. Matt Kredich, how you doing, mate?
Doing great. It's great to be back with you.
It is, man. It is. Thanks for doing this, and a lot to talk about, both in life and in the pool. So appreciate it. One of the main reasons I wanted to get you on here is to really shine a spotlight on your son Ben. Who is just been this incredible force in the world, and we lost him last year, and at the time, I didn't know how to respond, just like everybody else. I was just in complete shock, and I was just, a friend of mine, dear friend of mine, has just lost his son, and you don't know what to do. Like, you just panic, you just, like, you freeze. And I know that you and I eventually did get on a call with your wife Kim, and you were driving, and it was just within the first couple of weeks, and we spent a lot of time talking and crying and just sharing stories. But now I'm at a point where I really want to shine a light on his life. Like I said, I mean, what an incredible human, and the impact that he's had and will continue to have. So let's talk about Ben.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks. And I really can't thank you enough for inviting me to do this. That phone call was really impactful. It just, you were the right person to talk to me and
Mm,
Kim at the right time. And we were coming back from New York City, where Jordan Crooks was being honored with as a nominee for the Sullivan Awards, and and but to me, more importantly, we were heading up there to spend time with Ben's brother, my son Coleman, who had just moved up to New York City at the beginning of August, and um, just started a new job, and 3 weeks later lost his brother. And
mm,
we were all together, right? For the probably 2 weeks, 3 weeks after Ben died, and then Coleman had to go back to work. And when we were on our way up there, I was still, traumatized, and Kim was still traumatized. And, a lot of the things that you and I talked through were really helped me kind of get oriented and, um, and helped me put things in perspective. And I can tell you that process is ongoing. I'm
mm,
still trying to do that. But one of the things that I keep coming back to, and this is a conversation that I have very often with my family and people who knew Ben, is we're all just so incredibly blessed to be part of this life. Is a life that ended too soon, but it was 24 years of um, just incredible stories and teachings and learnings and adventures. A lot of agonizing times as well, but the ability to reflect on it is really healing and helpful. So I
mm.
thank you for allowing me to do that here, and thank you for that call at the time. It was really impactful.
I appreciate it, man. And look, it's yeah, I mean, I've got a son too, and so it's like you put yourself in your shoes, and you think to yourself how devastatingly horrible, and like I wouldn't even know what to do. Again, like, even as a parent like that, I would just freeze. I would just, like, the world has just stopped. So yeah, I mean, but I knew you needed people. I didn't know when and how exactly. I just knew you did. And now this event happened right around the start of school, didn't it?
Yes, it did. It was August 21st was a Monday, and our first team meeting, first day of class, was on that Wednesday. So
Wow.
the freshmen had just moved into the dorms. A lot of the upperclassmen either were coming back that day or had come back. So it
Mm,
was um, he was walking to meet me for dinner. We had dinner together every Monday night, the same restaurant. It's about 2 blocks from the pool. And I expected him to be at the pool, and he didn't show up. And then I looked at the Find My app, and he was in the same place as he was a half hour before when I looked. And started knowing that something was wrong. And so, I mean, the way that day unfolded was just horrible. But I think by the time school started that Wednesday, and certainly the team and the staff were devastated, and I'm not exactly sure what happened there, but I know that over time, I mean, that was the way that the year started. And so each person on the team and on the staff had that to deal with personally, and then that to deal with in a group sense. And amazing relationships with Ben, and some never knew him. A lot of the freshmen had never met him. Almost all the staff had spent a lot of time with him, watched him grow up. Rob even coached him. So the way that started so each person had to essentially deal with some personal grief themselves. And what I think that they found, it was that grief really needs community. And I think that's what you sensed. That's why you called me. And we sensed that over and over again. Grief needs community and for people to be together. And so I mean, I can't say enough about the way that our team and our staff got together and, resolved to move forward from that point. And because I was not functional for a while after that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can understand that completely, non-functioning. So how do you decide between yourself and Kim to even move forward with the season as a coach at that point in time?
I think it was a daily, there was a daily sort of ritual that I went through. And one of the very first things I did was to go find a grief counselor, and found this woman who's a godsend. And both Kim and I started seeing her, and one of the very first things that she let me know is that this was in fact a trauma. So it's a kind of an assault that's absorbed by the body, and there are all these traumatic responses that I needed to deal with, and Kim as well, the boys as well. And so she gave me some tools with which to deal with those things, and I would do that. I'd spend my mornings doing that, and part of it was talking to Kim, and part of it was spending time by myself, and part was talking to other people. But I felt this need to get back to the pool, not because I felt like the pool needed me, but I needed to see what was happening and to be around. I think what I wanted most, if you talk to people who suffer, the loss of somebody who's really close, a lot of times people will say, I was so mad at the world for moving on and not recognizing, the loss that I have, because my world's so different and the world seems to be moving forward. I thought the opposite. I needed to see the world moving forward. And when I got to the pool deck, I could not function. My coaching brain couldn't function, but I would just take such joy and comfort from just watching these young people play and swim, pursue swimming, pursue diving, goof around on the deck before and after practice, chat, give me a hug. Being around life reminded me of the relentlessness of life. Like, life just goes on, and it's beautiful. There's so much beauty. And I felt like being around people, I couldn't do it at the number of hours that I had done it before, but being around people was really important. And being reminded of that was important. And then I think over time it's like the connections started forming again. And, I'd stand on the deck and have this memory of, like, Ben spent so much time on that deck. almost expect him to walk through the door, and when he walked through the door, he'd say hi to people and ask them, how's their pet, or are you from Sweden? And like, he might have said that to him 100 times before, but like, he had this ritual, and I would find myself kind of drifting off, but that was a good thing to remember Ben, and to feel, okay, this place still has its presence. But then I really had a hard time looking at the pool and knowing what was happening, but slowly those connections started coming back. And once a few of those wires connected again, it's like a few more connected and a few more connected. And I remember there's one morning, it was probably late September. I had this thought at like 4:15 in the morning. It was, I'm embarrassed to tell you this, but I remembered this recruiting call that I had made like 3 nights before Ben died, and thought, I wonder what happened to her. And because I don't know if anybody called her, but it's all of a sudden I sat up and I was awake, and I thought, well, I know they're having practice. I hadn't gone to morning practice. I know they're having practice. I think I'll go in. And that, I really enjoyed the practice that morning, came back that afternoon, did the same thing. So slowly over time, again, like, my staff was awesome, and just not asking for or expecting anything from me, and allowing me to kind of figure out how to put myself back into some kind of flow. And over time, Kim started pushing me a little bit more. Like, you want to practice tomorrow? Like, I don't know. She said, you were happy yesterday when you went. So yeah, I think over time, I got into a good routine, and at some point I thought, I think I can do this. I think I can continue to coach, because I wasn't really even sure of that for a while.
I was going to say, I mean, if you're being really honest with yourself and maybe even vulnerable right now, like, was there a point where you're like, I'm done, I can't do this anymore? I'm sure you probably had a moment, right?
Many. Yeah. Well, and it wasn't a decision. It was more a question. It's like, I would stand by the side of the pool and truly not know, like, when you coach an athlete, and I told you before, I loved the conversation that you had with Bruno a couple of days ago, because there's something really special about coaching somebody for that long.
Right.
But even when you coach somebody for a relatively short period of time, you have this history with them, and you know that history, and it's brought you to this moment, and then you've talked about a future, and that future is something that you, in your mind, you've projected, and it's kind of this shared vision for the future. All that was gone. Like, I knew who I was looking at, and I knew I cared about and loved these people, but the swimming part wasn't coming back. And I was, I think, reasonably certain at times that, well, I know I can't coach like this. And to be really honest, I felt like it would be okay if I walked away. Like, I don't need this.
No.
I don't need to be the Tennessee swimming coach. And I think that was kind of liberating, because I think any occupation, I hope any occupation, is as a part of a life, as much as we care about what we do and feel a calling to do what we do, that part of our lives and identity, I think, pales in comparison to who we are to the people that we love the most. And for me, Ben was he was the center of my world. He was somebody, I mean, I always knew what he had eaten on a particular day. Like, he was picky about what he ate. I knew whether he needed exercise that day. I knew whether he had gotten social contact. I knew whether he had a hug that day. Like, that's the way parents think, and that's the way I got to think about him. And there was so much more. It left a hole that was so massive that everything around the hole seemed to be kind of turned upside down and not as important as figuring out how to reorient myself in this world.
Mm. That made me cry, man. I was supposed to we held off long enough, but it doesn't seem like it's ever
came with tissue.
that's never going to go away.
No,
I guess what we've learned through this too is that the impact that Ben had, like it's everlasting too. Like and for those that don't know, like Ben had learning disabilities, right?
So Ben was diagnosed with autism at age 2,
Okay.
and we knew something was really different about him. And if you don't mind me talking about this for a little while, it's important because somebody listening either has a sibling or a child with a disability or someday will.
Mm-hmm.
At the time when Ben was born, it felt like an epidemic of autism. 1 in 50 boys was being diagnosed with autism. And I think that the numbers are even more, like 1 in 30 or something now.
Wow.
But it was early in the days of understanding autism and understanding what we now know is that things that are like conditions, I guess, that are labeled as autism look many different ways. And I think some have moved out of that umbrella. But when we received the diagnosis, we were given a pamphlet, and the pamphlet had been, this is 2002, we received the diagnosis. The pamphlet had been written in 1989 and basically said, and this is from a doctor, said your child will never form social relationships. Your child will not be able to live independently. Your child will have great difficulty in learning. And I remember we're driving kind of a ways from the doctor's office and looking in the rearview mirror at this kid in the child seat who snuggled with me every night, who was absolutely voracious in his appetite to discover things, to learn things, and who laughed every day. Like he was in tears a lot. He was frustrated all the time. Autism is a communication disorder with some social deficits, and so he struggled with a lot of things, but none of what the pamphlet said was true. And so I think, I mean, the pamphlet didn't last the car ride, but we did start looking at different ways to help him discover his world, to help him and his brothers. He had 2 brothers, a twin, Miles, and his younger brother, Coleman, to help our family grow with this diagnosis and this disability. And so in many ways, our lives have shaped around that journey for him. Kim is this tremendous musician who kind of left her career as a musician and became an advocate for Ben. Knox County schools do a lot of things well, but what they haven't done well over many years is follow the federally mandated laws that require that a child is integrated into the regular classroom with all supports and services as a first option, and not, as soon as they get a diagnosis, be put into a room with people with similar diagnoses. So Kim, we had to fight hard, and Kim really led the charge on that over his life. And so many amazing things came out of that. So including what I'm doing right now. So this I'll tell you about this documentary in a second, but this T-shirt is named after a documentary. I'm at Riceville Beach finishing up a documentary about a number of families, all of whom Kim has helped. She's helped them gain inclusion in the classroom in schools in and around Knoxville. And so as Ben went on his journey, he kind of blazed the trail for other people in the school system. He had amazing support from one particular aide from third grade on. And then he had so many outstanding teachers, just incredible human beings who brought him in and included him. And on the sidelines, Kim was always fighting to make sure that he wasn't being pulled out, he wasn't being removed, and that he could be with his peers. That's the main thing, that he would be included. He would grow with the other kids his age. And I think as a parent, we all see up close the incredible differences between our children, whether they have labels or not. I mean, I think your son is a brilliant musician, right? Yeah. So he's so different probably from your daughters, and that's an incredible thing. And the people who grew up with your son, the people who grew up with Ben, got the benefit of his unique, his 1 in a billion, never been seen before combination of gifts. And to me and to us, that's the beauty of inclusion. Is sure, like for Ben, it was awesome. He was stretched, and he learned these social skills, and he made these amazing friendships. And everybody who is in those classes with him has been impacted by him. There's so many of his classmates who were like true friends have gone into special education, they've gone into teaching, have gone into recreational therapy. And so many of and that would not have happened had he not been in their classroom, had they not, grown up side by side with him. And that happened all the way through college. He was in this wonderful program at Tennessee called the Future Program for high school graduates with intellectual disabilities. And during that time, he kind of completed everything that the doctors said he wouldn't be able to do. He lived independently. He became employed. He had these amazing friendships. And yeah, in so many ways, he made huge impacts on people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. It still is, in terms of the things that he did while he was here are still living on, right? Like musically, even like he was incredibly musically, wasn't he?
He was. Yeah, Kim discovered, he was so frustrated as a child, as a 2, 3, 4-year-old, because communication was difficult for him. And one of the things that I believe, and we started to believe about his autism in particular, was that he had trouble filtering some of the things that we naturally filter. Like right now, there's an air conditioner blowing this hotel room. He came to my first or second SECs with me. He visited me, and he could still tell you that the radiator in the Lexington hotel room played a D. So he knew the note. His whole world was sounds that we filter out. And so Kim discovered when he was when we were actually trying to potty train him, I think he was 2.5 or 3, that he got really upset when she sang, let's say, Twinkle Twinkle at some times, and then other times he'd sing along with her. He'd be the happiest kid in the world. What she finally discovered was that if she sang it in the key that he had learned it in, and which is typically the key of C, the world was right. if she sang it in any other key, it would be like the sky was painted red, or, you know, water turned brown, or like, or turned rancid. It would be,
Wow.
it would be something that would completely disorient him. So when she discovered that, I think she basically let him know, hey, like, I see your world. I'm in your world. You're in my world. Here's this connection. And
Wow.
it's like he was released. And over time, he became, he always wanted to live in our world too. Like, so he would, maybe Kim would play it and sing in a key that was like a half step off, and he'd say, no, no, no. But then smile, like, okay, now she's playing with me, and bring it back. So his world was sound, and he would, I remember taking him to a cello lesson. He loved the cello. And instead of bowing it above the bridge, so there's the bridge and then the strings and the place where you usually play, he found the notes that it made just below the bridge, which were these really wild, high-pitched sounds.
Wow.
So he would explore. We would find on his phone, he became a master of GarageBand. He would take, like, he took that song Some Nights by Fun, and he figured out every note of it, and he transcribed it onto his phone.
Wow.
When that song comes on in the pool deck, I start crying, because it would bring him so much joy. But he had guitars, he had drums, he could play that. He ended up being a professional piano player. He played piano for nursing homes.
Wow.
So yeah, his world was music. I was just with somebody who was telling a story about Ben. He used to go over to their house when he was like 12, and they had a lot of pets. He would stand in front of the bird cage and play songs to the birds, and then he'd go sing different songs to the dogs. I didn't know he was doing this, but
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh man, it sounds like he's a sprinter trapped in a musician's body.
I'll tell you, the fastest he ever swam, he swam and never loved it. So maybe like some sprinters.
Yeah.
Water was too cold, like a lot of sprinters. But I remember the fastest he ever swam, he was negotiating with me whether he's going to, I wanted him to get exercise every day. So he'd start off with 20 laps in the short course pool, and then he'd try to negotiate down.
Definitely a sprinter.
Definitely a sprinter. And Molly Hannes was in the pool one day, and I said, I was kind of tired of negotiating with him, because we were going to go eat dinner afterwards. I said, okay, if you race Molly for 2 laps, you can get out after 2. And he looked at me, and he looked at Molly, and he dove in, and those little skinny arms just turned over like a motorboat. And probably dusted like Molly started pushing off, but she didn't swim because she wanted to see what he was doing. It's like none of us had ever seen anything like that before. But he could also he could go forever. He would bob in the pool for hours if the pool was warm. Yeah, he had a unique relationship with the water. He loved the water, didn't love it cold, and didn't really like to be told what to do.
He sounds like a man of my heart right there. Him and I would have got on well.
For sure.
Bobbing up and down in the water, the warm water. Yeah, that's it.
Yep.
Now, this was also, for people that don't know, a freak accident too. Like, it wasn't a situation where he was doing anything wrong or he was putting himself in harm's way, or like, this was truly a freak accident, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. He was walking on the sidewalk, and like he had done, probably 100 times before. And it was 4:30 in the afternoon, and he was killed by a man who had OD'd a few hours before. I'm going to tell you my understanding of it. This guy OD'd a few hours before, was taken to the emergency room, was given Narcan to keep him alive, keep him from dying. Was taken to the hospital, refused treatment, found his way back to his car, and got back in the car. Whether he took more drugs or not, we're not really sure, but he was very impaired when he got back in the car, and somehow he made it down this really busy road, and he crossed across 2 lanes of traffic and hit Ben from behind. Ben never saw it coming, witnesses told us, and was killed instantly. The man who killed him was taken to the hospital and charged, and the trial will be sometime, I think, in the next few months. But one of the good things that's come from that is a piece of legislation that passed unanimously in the Tennessee House and Senate, which is quite an accomplishment in itself. And the legislation basically gives first responders the kind of the responsibility to educate somebody who receives Narcan if they give Narcan to somebody because of an overdose. Gives them the responsibility to educate them to say that for the next 24 hours they are impaired, and if they drive, then they're subject to arrest for driving while impaired, which is a felony. And we feel really good about that, because I think that, at least from our perspective, there's a thought that Narcan, when it's administered, basically sobers somebody up and they're good to go. It's not true. It wears off probably before the effects of the opioid wear off. And so that piece of legislation has Ben Kredich's name on it, and wow, I think can serve as maybe is certainly a standalone help, and maybe the scaffolding for more legislation in the future. That I mean, ultimately the goal is to have this never happen to anybody else again, and I think this helps reduce the chances that that'll happen.
Have you got any indication of the fact that this was a kind of a common practice? If someone was to come out of this, getting this medication, and then having them hand their keys back to them, is that common?
No, and I guess it's uncertain how this actually happened. So again, this is my understanding of the story, was this gentleman was found unresponsive in his car, given Narcan, taken to the hospital. He was not in possession of his keys at the time. And when he was released from the hospital, I don't think that they kept track of where he was and who he was. The police were never called in either in the administration of the Narcan or after he was released. And that seems problematic. And then somehow he got back to his car. We're not really sure how that happened. And somehow he regained possession of his keys. Not sure how that happened.
How are you feeling? How are you and Kim, and maybe even the kids, Miles and Coleman? How are you feeling as a family in terms of having to relive this through the trial?
Well, interestingly enough, at least I expected, and I think I can speak for the family, I think we all probably expected to feel some real anger at this person. That never came. And I really can't tell you why, other than that he's, the opioid epidemic is a sickness, and it's this horrible ongoing tragedy in our country and beyond. And it's a man that didn't intend to kill Ben, and no matter what happens to him, it doesn't bring any. There's nothing that I can imagine that would, make me feel better about the whole situation. So we went, and Kim and I went and sat in the courtroom during the arraignment, and and he came and sat right in front of us, which was bizarre. It's not really supposed to happen.
Mm.
And that was traumatic for me, just because it placed me so close to that day. But it was really more about the day than about the person. And
Mm-hmm.
and there's this just ongoing conversation that I have with myself about how, for a while, I felt like I failed to protect him. Like the job of a parent is to protect.
Mm.
And then I remembered, the job of a parent is to protect for a while, and then it is to help raise children who will be independent, and who don't need you to protect them. And so, and I feel great about that. I mean, he wasn't doing anything that was autistic. He was living alone. He wanted to get exercise. So like he loved being outside and walking. So he listening to his music, and he was walking to dinner with dad, which he loved and I loved. And this kind of beautiful thing. And then there's the trauma of the day, which is this violence that was done to his body. And that's really, really difficult. And then there's the sudden loss, just the extinguishing of a life. That's the end. And that's so painful. Like it's still so raw and so painful. And I think it will always be really painful to feel that loss. But then the other part of the conversation is just the immense gratitude that I have for his life, for this. And I sit back in awe at the ripple effects of his life, and in some cases of his death, and how it showed me so much, it uncovered so much love in people that I know, and for my children, and for Kim. Like we've had this tremendous support, and I think that love was directed towards Ben in his life, and now is sort of amplified in the world because of his death. And so I think we all kind of toggle back and forth between like the staggering trauma of the loss, the sadness of the finality of it, but then the immense beauty of his life and what it's revealed to us, as well as just a tremendous gratitude for the fact that we got to be participants and inextricable from this 24 just incredible years.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk swimming now then. I said publicly at the end of your season that you should be NCAA Coach of the Year for that. I mean, if it's based on coaching performance, there's none better in terms of holding a team together. Even if your support staff, carried a lot of that, it's out of the respect for you, and then the way you brought it together, and then ultimately the performances you had. I mean, what did you guys finish 4th on the women's side?
Yeah, the women were 4th, the men were 6th.
I mean, that's insane. That's an incredible year competitively. If none of this happens, but considering all of this happened, like, how did you pull out the performance itself?
I don't know, other than say like these people that I get to coach and work with were just extraordinary this year, and there were so many like little stories that it sounds kind of trite, but that you knew if you're on the inside, and that were just beautiful. And one of the best examples I can tell right now is because it just had this incredible ending, was with the women. We were Regan Rothwell is just made the Canadian Olympic team. So that there's the happy ending. She made it in the 200 back. But what she's been through in the past 2 years is unbelievable. Her first dual meet, she swam a great 200 backstroke against NC State, and it was one of these 2-day formats. The next day, she swam the 50 back, leading off the relay, and on the first stroke, dislocated her shoulder, and then for the rest of the race, continued to swim with a dislocated shoulder, shredding her labrum in the process. So she was out for 8 months with that. In the meantime, she was doing a decent amount of single arm swimming with the other arm. And by the end of that 8 months, we discovered that labrum was torn also. So she had to have that one redone. She had a couple other significant medical issues, including this kind of bizarre growth in her neck. So that she wasn't really able to swim until our last dual meet. She did one race, was really sore afterwards, and it was a good swim, but we didn't take her to the conference meet. Took her to the last chance meet. She went 153 in the 200 back, made NC2As, like kind of a jaw-dropping performance. We went to NCAAs. She had a great 100 back, 151 flat, made the A final, except she got DQ'd for right after the start, apparently curling her toes up over the gutter. I have not seen that DQ before. So think of 2 years of this young woman doing rehab, trying to fight to get back, having this incredible swim, and then nope, you're not really back because we're going to DQ you. Wow. And she hopped out of the pool, walked over in the pool deck, smiled and shook her head, and basically said something along the lines of, just another piece of the comeback. And I mean, just a badass thing to say. And that kind of attitude is really what I think you could see it in our men's team. You could see it in our women's team. There really wasn't anything that took somebody down a path of despair. And whether that's the perspective of starting the year with this horrible tragedy, or you know, just the combination of really mature people that we have, I don't know, but you know, they inspired me, and this year was I think as connected to any team that I've ever felt, both men and women. And I think part of it is because, you know, they helped me through a really, really difficult time. And when my emotions were just laid bare, and you know, they saw me in tears often. Like I don't really mind crying anymore. And they comforted me, and I think also appreciated the joy that they could see in, you know, in the fact that I love to coach, and I love to be on the pool deck with them, and I loved celebrating the victories with them this year. So I think it's hard to describe chemistry, but I think that chemistry and culture that we developed this year was really, really special, and allowed us to move through some things that might have derailed teams in the past. And also allowed us to experience, you know, really high levels of exhilaration at triumphs that, you know, some may be public, some may not, but I think we did a good job celebrating things that should be celebrated. Yeah.
I mean, to see a coach lead through vulnerability is pretty unique too. You know, like I don't think you get that story very often. You know, it's usually the hardness, you know, the toughness, and it's like to see somebody be vulnerable and lean on them as well as much as they're leaning on you is pretty incredible, pretty unique. You know, what a unique experience, and obviously it manifested in them. Like they're not going to turn around and think, "Woe is me," because I curled my toes at the start of a 200 back. You know, it's like I can get over that. You know, it'll be okay. You know, so certainly helpful. But obviously, in this day and age where it's shifting, you know, and we're hearing a lot of how people used to coach and how coaching has changed. How have you managed to still kind of implement, or maybe just get them to understand, like when you do need to be tough, or when you do need to suck it up, or when you see something in them that maybe they can't see in themselves, or maybe they need some discipline? How do you manage that these days?
Um, I mean, I have to say, bringing this back to Ben, I truly believe he's the greatest teacher I've ever had in my life.
Mm.
And one of the things that I learned from him was that we were so close that when I got angry, I could see that sort of ripple through his body,
Mm.
and it would cause hours, sometimes days, even years of repercussions, because he did not like me being angry, and he would struggle to understand where that came from.
Mm.
And so, because the repercussions would keep coming back to me, I did a lot of I think kind of self-examination in, like, where is that emotion coming from, and what's the difference between anger and intensity,
Mm.
and what's the difference between me. I'm 6'5". I'm a big presence. Like, how is that perceived by a freshman, let's say female, who's like 5'6" or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
and there's this sort of power dynamic that we as coaches have to be very aware of, and
Mm.
that being having those instances with Ben made me really think about, okay, this emotion that I have is going to get transferred to them
Mm.
somehow. And with some people, I think intensity, like life and intensity, and if I can bring intensity with a smile, then it's exciting. If
Mm.
I bring intensity with uncertainty, where they're uncertain, then that creates a defensive reaction, kind of a fight or flight reaction that I actually don't think helps, and the message tends to get lost.
Mm.
And I have learned that over time. I think, I wish, if I have regrets in coaching, I wish I could go back to a time when I felt like I let that anger come out of me, and thought, well, they need to see that this is wrong, and
Mm.
but I'm not sure that the lessons were really learned. And if anybody felt like, yeah, we needed that, I cringe when I remember people saying we needed to be yelled at, because I don't actually don't know if that's ever okay. Like, and I have spent more time coaching women than men in my career, but if a woman says she needed to be yelled at by a male authority figure, that scares me for what she is going to look for in any kind of a relationship. And
Yeah.
it's not exclusively to women, but that struck me. So
Yeah.
I think we as coaches can be, one of the best things that we can do as parents and coaches is be the voice in their head that's going to remind them of what they're capable of, and overpower the voice that says, I can't do this, or I'm not good enough. Like, very few people that I've ever coached really suffered from thinking that they were able to do more than they actually could.
Right.
So many suffer from um, selling themselves short. And
Right. Yeah.
so I think we as coaches can provide that authoritative voice that hopefully then someday becomes their own voice. I can, patience is a virtue. I didn't do it yet. Like I can't do it yet. Those kinds of messages, I think, can be delivered with intensity and with urgency without being delivered with anger or hurt. Because as soon as that switch gets turned on, where they have that kind of sympathetic fight or flight reaction, the lesson isn't going to get learned anyway, other than maybe I'm not good enough, or this person is hostile, and which means they're going to kind of tune you out in the future anyway.
Yeah.
And the other thing I have to tell you is, I just, have felt so much just appreciation and love for the people that I work with and that I get to coach this year, that I think things that might have irritated me in the past, I either have found amusing or just kind of let roll off me. And I don't know that that's a permanent state. Part of me that wishes it was, and part of me thinks I think maybe I'm also letting some things slide that I should address. But I haven't really taken many really authoritative stances this year.
Yeah. Well, there's growth, and hopefully those people that you did coach at a time where you did yell understand that that there has been growth in you, and there has been a shift, and it's like maybe there's some grace in that too, which is nice, and like we all grow and we all learn. And I look back on my time and I think to myself, why did I lose my temper at that point in time? Like I could have managed that better for sure, and you just don't get that time back. So the fact that you're still there leading and growing and learning, and they're allowing you to do that is incredible too. It's nice. And so that's good. I guess my frustrations as a podcaster is the quality of sound and video. So sometimes you were frozen there, but I could hear you. We could all hear you perfectly clear. So anyone that's watching this, understand it does frustrate me when you're speaking so eloquently and it freezes on you, but I can hear you and it's good. But just tell me, why are you in a hotel room right now?
Yeah. So Kim started this, well, back when Ben was 6, 7, 8 years old, we discovered through a series of coincidences this amazing surf camp down in Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina. It was run by a group called Indo-Jack's Surf Charities, and they ran an autism surf camp, and we were looking for something to do with Ben. We knew he loved the water. He had great balance, and I love Wrightsville Beach. I spent a lot of time here growing up, and so we actually tried to sign him up for an autism surf camp, and the date didn't work. But Jack Viorel, the guy who runs the camp, said, "Bring the whole family down here. He doesn't need to go to the autism camp. We only run those so that families will sign their kids with autism up and not feel like they have to leave the kid behind or leave the siblings behind. So bring all the boys down. We'll take care of them." So we had this amazing week at surf camp, became really good friends with the guy who runs it. And over time continued to come. A few years later, that developed into him wanting to teach our team how to surf. So I brought the Tennessee women's team down here in the fall, and we would have a competition with UNC Wilmington, spend a couple days on the beach, learn to surf, had this great experience. The relationship grew. In 2015, Kim thought, okay, if this surf camp, and this guy runs surf camp for kids with diabetes, medically fragile kids who have lost their sight.
Mm.
Wounded warriors, like all these special populations. He thinks the world is better if everybody can surf. And so Kim took some of these families that she was advocating for and said, hey, let's take our kids surfing. So we moved the surf camp from Knoxville down to Wrightsville Beach, had this amazing experience. She had the foresight to document some of it and to interview people and to talk about this inclusive surf camp.
Wow.
We did it again a couple more times. And in the meantime, some of these families took their cases where they're battling the school system to have their child included. They took these cases to higher level, to the courts, and several of them have gone up to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals and come out with these landmark decisions on interpretation of special education law. And so it's 2024. Ben passed away in 23. Kim said, you know what? We need to finish the story on these families. And so she has put together this one last surf camp. And when Ben died, a lot of people donated money to a charity of his choice. Our charity was Interjects Surf Camps, Surf Charities. And they have, that money has funded a summer's worth of camps for them, as well as the ability for a professional production team to take this footage, to come down here and finish this documentary. And so this documentary is called Push Into the Swell. This is, you can see it if the camera's not frozen. And it's, yeah, inclusion in our schools and the power of advocacy. We want this documentary to be something that's available for free to schools, teacher education programs, parents, just to essentially examine the different ways that inclusion can be achieved through following special education law, and in some cases where inclusion is denied. So we want educators and parents to know the law and to know the outcomes, like all the amazing outcomes that happen when you do include children with disabilities in the regular classroom.
Wow.
So
that's cool, man.
We're here I left practice last night and came down here, and I'm here for the weekend to try to finish this thing up.
Awesome. What a story. That's brilliant, man.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, make sure we can get some copy of it too when it gets out, hey?
Yep. I'll make sure to get that to you.
Yeah, cool. Awesome, man. Well, listen, I guess a couple of weeks out of U.S. Olympic trials, how many have you got going? And do you have any American contenders for the team?
We do. We have, I think, 18, 19 that have been training with us going.
Okay.
Got a good small pro group, which includes Erica, formerly Brown, now Erica Connolly, who made the Olympic team last time. Gabby DeLoof, who was a finalist last time. Katie DeLoof, who made the team last time. And then we've got some people that are just kind of young and hungry. We've got it's also cool. We've got 4 people who have graduated and who want to finish their long course careers at Olympic trials with their team. Josephine Fuller was an A finalist in 3 events at NCAAs this year and has just improved at a dramatic rate every year. And she's now in the hunt, I think, in maybe the 2 IM, the 2 back, 100 back. So we've got a group, some of whom are just really excited and young and ready to kind of take the next step and hopefully get a second swim at trials. Others who want to take a shot at making finals and getting in that last heat and taking a shot at making the team.
Awesome. Luna, my dog Luna just had to have a little bark at that one. Calm down, girl. That's awesome, man. Well, listen, good luck with all that. You know, it's going to be interesting. I'm out there for the the whole
great.
time. So hopefully we can catch up together live as well.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, but good luck with all that, man. It's exciting. There's just so much great swimming going on, isn't there? As a swim fan, if you just look at it from that perspective, I mean, the Olympic year is always so exciting, and it's just crazy how fast people are swimming, how deep it is. It's awesome.
Yeah, and it's a massive game of chess, and nobody really knows all the rules of the outcome. But you see these fast swims popping up in all these different places, and then the competitors have to deal with it. Like, is that intimidating? Are they too fast? And even people who go fast are like, oh, did I go too fast too soon?
Yeah.
So it's just, there's so much swirling around it that it's just fun. It's just, there's so much energy around it. I love this time, and I'll love going through it, and I'll also love it when it's done. I'll stay in Paris for another week or two and kind of relax afterwards.
Oh, very cool. That's awesome. I wish I was going to Paris. That'd be fun. But no, I'll be watching it on TV like everybody else, talking about it, probably having a little whiskey,
Yeah. Well, if you want some commentary every once in a while, feel free to give me a call.
Oh, absolutely. Let's do it for sure. All right, man. Listen, I appreciate you sharing your family story, Ben's story, and yeah, it's tragic, but at the same time, it's amazing the impact that he's still having and still going to have. So yeah, I appreciate you taking the time, man.
Well, I know I speak on behalf of my family. Thank you for, putting more of Ben out into the world and giving me the chance to talk about him. He made a huge impact. He will continue to do so. And when we talk about him, it's our way of continuing to love him.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, brother. I'll see you soon, huh?
All right. Thanks, Brett.
Take care.